Hello, my name is Mike Bea with Bangert. In today's session, we're going to talk about how to process employee expenses in Sage Intacct Construction. We will first go into some configuration settings and show you some options you have as far as how dimensions code, what particular requirements for the employees that they need to enter in information on, and also if you want to turn on approvals and define your approval process. We'll also discuss payment methods for the employees as far as a check versus direct deposit or ACH. And we'll go through and set up some expense types for various types of coding for how you want to post your expenses to the general ledger. Then we'll go in and enter in some expense receipts and process that expense sheet for payment. So let's dive into it. So as far as configuration goes, you're going to go directly into the, at the top level, you're going to go into time and expense, and you'll notice under setup, there's configuration. So I'm going to go through some of this real quick, browse through it, and show you some different options. It's going to post specifically to its own employee expense journals in the general ledger, so you'll be able to break that out easily and report on that as far as all the detail goes. We're going to turn on something called expense types. And as you're going through this, anytime you see a question mark, you can click on it. And it just gives you some information on what that does and what that allows you to do. And this gives us some extra security. So basically, what I'm going to do is scroll down here. And I'm going to show you the dimensions. So this is going to be how you want to code your information and what dimensions do you want to make available when entering expenses. This is also for timesheet entry as well, but in this case, we usually recommend keeping them all turned on, and then you could decide in a later step which ones you want to code to when you're doing your expense receipt. As far as it goes, you can have your own number structures. So when the employees turn in expense reports, you can number them consecutively. You can have it set up so that it obviously does not allow duplicate numbers. And what is your default payment method? So depending on the company, you may reimburse the employees via a physical check or an ACH direct deposit. This is where you can default that and default what bank account it's going to come out of. But also you could decide that at the employee level as well. So you could have one employee that's going to receive a direct deposit and one employee that's going to get a physical check. That's up to your company and determine what rules you want to apply there. What you can also do is determine what required fields you want to have when the employees are entering information. For example, you could turn on and off these four functions here. Do you want to require a report number? Do you want them to put in the reason for the expense and also who they paid it to and what they paid it for? Okay, so you could determine if these fields are required or not. I am going to make the date field required. That just seems to make sense for posting information. One of the other nice features I like here is you can decide on how you want the dimensions to pre-fill. So dimensions are further breakdown of coding on the transaction, and you can do it basically when it's related to a project. So typically the order is going to be the project dimensions should be the first phase of where it grabs the information. So if that particular line is for a project specific expense, we should get the dimensions or, departments, things like that from the project. If it's not, then get it from the employee file. So you could do it either way, but in this case, we're going to set it up project then employee. As I scroll down, another section that's optional is expense report approval settings. So you guys can determine if you want to set up an expense approval workflow and how you want that workflow to happen in the system. In this scenario, I do have the expense report approval settings turned on. I have that button turned on. I also want to receive an email notification letting me know that I have something to approve in the system, and we'll see that in a second. And I don't want to turn this on, limit approval. Basically, this does allow you, though, to have the ability, if there's different approval methods where maybe it's by project manager and there's two lines of expenses, one for one project, one for another. If you turn this button on, the person who's responsible for approving that one line will not see the other line if they if they aren't responsible for approving it. So I'm going to leave that off for now. And then what you can do is you could do value-based approval levels and expenses. So you can say anything over a penny, I want it to go to my first level approver. And that first level approver can be dictated down here by the first. So and there's various methods here. So the one that we've picked for today is I want the employee's manager to approve his expenses. So his or her expenses. So we will have in the employee setup, you will see where you put that manager, but we can have it be based on employee manager. It can be based on the value. It can be based on the project manager. So if there is a project on that line, it can go to the project manager for approval, or a particular specific individual in your system. So you can have various ways that you can pre-fill these receipts. So we're going to keep it simple. Anything over a penny, I just want the employee manager to approval. That's it. You can go further and say anything over 10,000. You're going to require 2 people to approve it, and then we can define those 2 people. So you can get pretty specific on the approval levels here in Sage Intacct. So we're going to leave it on level 1, a penny. And we're not going to turn approvals on once we are going to generate the payment record. So we're going to just do our approvals at the initial receipt level. Once it's initially received, we don't need another approval set up for actually paying multiple receipts on a bill for an employee. But you could turn that level on as well and have a dual approval limit. And that's basically the configuration in time and expense. And let's close this out. Now I'm going to click Save. And the only other thing that, actually, let me take a step back here. Let's go in and take a look at the employees now. So you'll notice under time and expense, under setup, you have employees. Now in this scenario, you do want to make sure you're at the right entity. So I do have multiple companies here, and I just want to see employees that are specific to the general construction company. So I'm going to make sure that I switch my entity to GC before I dig into it. The configurations are typically set up at the top level, which we were in. And now we're going to go down to the entity level, which is company specific for a company specific employee list. So in my employee list here, I'll click under time and expense, setup employees. I'll click that and you'll see a list of employees. Now in here, I have the display hierarchy button turned on. And what that does is that will show me the employee list with a hierarchy in place. So basically it will show me who the employee managers are and who's under them. So for example, 999, myself, I am the manager for these 4 employees underneath it. So they're not in employee ID order anymore. They're shown based in the structure of who's the manager underneath them. I could turn off the hierarchy and then I'll just see it in employee ID order, or I can sort by last name if I want to, okay, and so forth. Well, when you click display hierarchy, now it's going to show me here as well. Okay, so what we'll do here is let's go into Robert Jones, and I'm going to click edit. And the one screen I want to show you in the employee setup is underneath, well, there's 2 things actually. Actually, let's go into a different employee. Let's go into my employee who I don't have a good name for yet, but he's called employee user. And if I click edit on him or her, what I could do is once I'm in here, 2 things I want to show you. On the main screen, you have the ability to dictate what attachment folder this employee's attachments go to. So what you can do is you could build attachment folders in here, and then you can have subfolders underneath that. So for example, I have a folder here called employee attachments. And then underneath that, each employee's name is listed. So I have my name, I have this user, I have employee user. These are all subfolders of employee attachments. So what you can specifically do for employee users is you can come into here and define what folder all their attachments go into automatically. Then you have one central location if you want to see all of the attachments or receipts that employee has brought into the entries. And we'll show you that later. So in the employee file, you could default a specific attachment folder, which we did. And then the only other tab here is under reimbursement information. This is where we're going to tell the system what is the payment method for this employee. This employee gets a check, and we're going to send automatic payment notifications. You can also say this employee is ACH. And if you enable ACH, here's where we can fill in their banking information when we generate the ACH file. Okay, so we're going to leave this employee how they were as a check. And if I go back into, let's go into Robert Jones. I believe Robert Jones is set up as an ACH. So we're going to generate one for an ACH and one for a check. Okay. So I wanted to show you that in the employee file. Back to home. So now the next thing you're going to want to do before processing expenses is in time and expense under setup, you have expense types. And you want to go through and set up the different types of expenses that you may possibly have for an employee. And what's going to be nice here is the employee, if they're entering their own expenses, they just need to select the expense type. The expense type is going to be tied to a general ledger account number. So they don't need to know what general ledger account number is. You're going to build a list of expense types that are tied to the account numbers. So as you can see here, I have a few set up. I have one for meals, one for mileage, truck expense, and there's where they're going to in the general ledger. What you can do is, if you want to add one, for example, let's set up one for hotels or lodging. What's nice is because you have this duplicate button, you can pick one that's pretty much exactly the same as the one you want to set up, except for the general ledger number. You can click Edit or View. Let's click Edit. And once you're in here, I can click Duplicate. Now, it doesn't really do much in this scenario here because it's just a description. So you really don't need to do Duplicate, but I'm going to do it anyways, and I'm going to click Duplicate. And now it's going to ask you to give it an ID. Let's call it lodging. And then I'm going to select the expense account that it should go to. I can pre-fill my sixes. I'm going to go down to my travel and entertainment, and you can see here I have a lodging expense account. Okay. So I can save that in there. If you have a particular item that we link to as far as like your cost types or categories, we might have material, labor. This is going to be an other item. And we'll click Save. Now you'll notice at the bottom, you have a place to put in rates. So for example, mileage. So if mileage is, we're offering a particular unit rate per mile that's standard, you can set this up down in here under rate per unit with a start date. And so now you can track the history of this as well. So if your mileage rates go up at the start of the year, you can put in your new line and up your rate, but still see the history of it in here as well. So you want to make sure you have all your different expense types set up. You do have the ability to set them up on the fly, but this is where they are under expense types in time and expense setup. Let's get back to home. Okay, so now we're ready to enter in some expenses. And let's first show you, let's log in as a employee user. So a user in the system can log in. This is an employee user type. So they only have limited data entry as far as what they can do in the system. But one of the things an employee user type can do in the system is enter in their expenses and enter in their timesheets. So I could assign a user an employee license, and I can come into here, and this employee, and we'll log in. We'll log into the software as themselves. And in this scenario, they would probably only have access to one entity. So I'm going to go right into the entity that they would log into, which is the GC company again. And in their scenario, they're still going to go to time and expense. And you'll notice here in their expenses, they have the ability to enter in their expenses, and also for any employees that they are a manager of. Now, in this case, this employee wouldn't be able to do anything because they don't have they're not a manager of any other employees. But in this case, is they're going to go in and enter their expenses, and I'm going to click the plus button, and you could do it right from the plus button and create a new one. It'll pre-fill in the date as today. Let's say they're entering expenses in for April 30th, so you can make it specific. If it's monthly, weekly, quarterly, however your expense reports are set, twice a month sometimes. So we'll say it's 4/30. It's going to post as of 4/30. You have overall attachments here for the receipts. So I could pull in the receipts here as well. And we'll show you that in a second. Now, if you remember back in the configuration, there's some fields here, reason for expense, for example. That was one of the fields that we were able to say make required. Now, we didn't do that. But, for example, maybe it's just 4/30 expense report, something like that. Okay. And then down in the detail here is where you would log in the detail of your entry. So, for example, I do have a receipt scanned in. So if they have a picture of the receipt or a file, they can attach it right here. You can click Add, and the user can drag it right into here. So, for example, if I drag a picture file that I have over in my emails, drop it in there, it's going to automatically name it. You can rename this if you want, but it's just going to name it, receipt for truck part. Okay, I could say, now we'll type it in as AutoZone here. So AutoZone 4/30/2023 and save. Okay, so now that attachment will be there. You can view it if you want. Try view attachments. You could also drag in multiple files there. So if you had an expense report with 10 receipts, you can drag them all in at once or separately, and they'll all be on this list here. When you click view attachment, we only have one, so it pops right up, but you'd have to pick which one you want to view to see it. So I can see here someone approving can look at this receipt, and we'll do that in a second. So it's $35.95. Okay, so then you can come down to here, and you could fill in the actual detail of the expense entries. So we made this date required here. I'm just going to use April 30th, but I would use the actual date of the transaction there. And then the question is this related to a project item? And we're going to say no, it's not in this case. It's just a repair for the truck. I had to pick up a part. So here's my required field, which is my expense types. So if I click list, I can see a list of all my different expenses. I can also just best fit. I can type in TR and it'll show me truck expense. I can select that. Department came in from my employee setup. I can override that, and these columns can be turned on and off. So when you're creating your workflow for expenses, you can turn on and off what the employee can and can't see and enter into. So in this case, I can put it in as a quantity if I have a quantity like mileage, or I can skip the quantity in the unit rate and I can just say amount. It was 35.95. Okay. Then you have some optional fields, and we saw this in configuration. Do you want to make sure they put in who they paid it to and who they paid it for? Truck part. Okay, so you can fill that all out. And then what entity they're in. So it depends on what you want them to fill out for your expense, and all this can be on an expense report as well. So then if I had more, I would just keep going here. So maybe I had some mileage. So let's say on 4/29, and I probably would have done that first. Let's say on 4/28, we drove to La Quinta Houston project, and now would pick maybe a cost code that is relevant here. But let's just say coordination, and it's going to be actually. This would be an other. I don't know if I have an other. Let me see if I have an other somewhere here. Yeah, I don't have any, so we can do this. So let's just put it to permits. There we go. Here's an other. So you put it to a relevant cost code or category, and then I can say, for example, mileage. And now in this case, you'll notice the rate pre-filled in. And I can say it was 75 miles, and we get reimbursed 63 cents a mile, so it's going to be 43.75. And then paid for, you don't have to fill that out, but travel to La Quinta. Okay, so you could fill that out. So at that point now, when the employee is done filling in his expense report or her expense report for this time period, they can click either a draft. So if they're not done, maybe they started it, they have a bunch of pile of receipts up on their desk, they want to start it and finish it later, they would save it as a draft. When they click submit, it actually then goes out for approval if the approval process is turned on. If it's not turned on, it goes right to approval, and then who's ever in charge in the office of generating expense reports could review it and print out an expense. So we have the approval turned on, so we're going to click submit here. And when we do that, it shows the employee the expense report, and it shows the state that it's been submitted in. Okay, once it's approved, it'll show as approved here. So the employee can also track their expense report. And then there's various reports they can run. You can click print here. Let's take a look at this one. And this is an expense report they can run. You could email this out. They could sign it. But you can see here's an expense report that the employee can print out. And then you can have signatures on it as well. And this can be emailed as well. Okay. So what we're going to do now, and you heard the chime there in my email. So me as the employee manager, I just got an email notification, and I'll pull this up for you. This isn't fancy by any means, but this is the out-of-the-box one, and all of this email layout can be determined by you guys. You can modify this, but basically there's an email I just got that says, hey, you have an expense report now for approval. It came from this employee. There's the report, and here's the instructions on what to do, and also here's how you can get to it. So I can click on it right here and log in. And we'll do that. So let's first log out, though, as this employee user. So I'll click log out. And now if I go back to my email, now if I was already logged into Intacct, it wouldn't be an issue, but let's go ahead and log in. So I'll click here. And now you'll notice it brings up my user, and I just have to put my password in. And I will log in now as a full business user or a project manager user, or employee user, and I could come in and approve this employee's expenses. So I could have a dashboard button here for my approvals. I'm going to go right into time and expense, and I can go to a couple different areas. I can go into the staff expenses here and see a list of them. I can also go into approve expenses here, and I can see a list of which ones are available to approve. I have an old one in there, but you could see here's one that we just did. There's the 8320. There's the report date, and I can approve it just at a high level here. If I want to select it, I can change the posting date if they put the wrong date in. But if I click report here, I could click and get right into the expense report area. And now I can see the transactions. I can see details if I want. And I can approve a line at a time, or I can approve all. And I can also see the attachments. So again, if there was more than one, you'd see more than one here, but I can come into here as a manager and I could view the receipts. Okay, and so forth. So let's do it. Since I'm logged in as the manager, let's go ahead and approve all. Okay, we're going to ignore that one for now. Actually, let's approve it, and let's change the date. We'll keep it all 4/30. Actually, let me do this. Set reporting date to that. Okay, as 4/30. Approve. Let's approve that one too. Okay. So now I have that expense approved. If I go into my staff expenses now, you'll see I can see you can filter it by dates, but I can see there's the one we just did and it said approved. Okay. It's listed as approved here. And I'm not sure on the other one because that was an older one. So we'll see. We'll see if we can do it. So at that point, now what I can do is as a admin, so this might go to the payables admin, whoever actually generates the expense checks out, will take it over from there. I have the authority to do that, so I'm going to stay in there. So at the end of the week, you're going to print out an expense report, showing basically who's available to reimburse. So what you can do here is there's a button in here called Select Expenses to Reimburse, and you can start that as a favorite. And if I click select it here, it will show me I can filter out what I'm paying right now. Let's say I'm doing the check run, not the ACH. I can say, let's just do employees that are getting a check. I can range a particular employee, a particular date. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is really just say, just show me the ones that are per check. And I can click the list on the right. And it will give me a list of all the expense reports that are ready, that have been approved, that are ready for payment. Okay, so you would see all your expenses and you could select them all for payment at the same time if you're doing an employee expense check run. In this case, we have one employee. You could put in amount to pay, so you could pay a partial. And then you can also determine what you want the payment date or check date to be. We'll pre-filter today's date. Let's say we want this all in 4/30, so we're going to use 4/30 for the payment date. You'll notice it fills it in right here. You can also override that by line. And when I check this box here, pay in full, so if you had multiple here, you can click the header and it will select them all for payment and fill the information in. It will also show you which bank account you want to pay it out of, and it will give you the balance. And then the total check run will show up right here. So once you are ready to generate that, you'll select your information, pay in full. You'll click the Save button. That's kind of like our Post button here. So we'll click the Save button. And what that will do is that will take it from Select Expenses to Approve. And now, because we don't have any approval on the secondary approval, we're going to come right into what's called Print Checks right here. So under Print Checks, now if I select I have to be careful on my check styles here. So I have pre-printed forms. Once I select that, it'll show me what checks are available to print. So I can see now that I have my checks and it's going to go out of this bank. There's my next check number. And now if you had 10 checks, you'd see them all right here. You can hit print and print stub detail as well. Okay, so you would select which ones you want. And then there's 2 steps here. The first step is to print the check. And then once the check prints successfully, you'll click confirm. The confirm is what's going to post. The confirm is going to post it and take it out of your cash account and show up in your cash management so you can do a bank rec over there, etc. So let's hit print. And once you hit print, it prints out a preview of the check, and this is where you would put your checks in the printer and then click the print button once you're ready to go there. Okay. And I'm going to assume it printed okay. And so now I have to confirm it. So now I'm going to check off confirm. Once you print, it automatically selects the confirm. And then I just say, yep, it went okay. Confirm. And that check is now posted through the system. So you've actually written a check and posted it for an employee expense. We'll quickly go through and let's enter in one for Robert Jones, just so I can show you the ACH workflow. So let's just add one real quick here. We'll do it for 4/30 again. We'll select Robert Jones. I'm sorry, yeah, Robert Jones. We're not going to put any attachments. We're just going to put an entry in quick enough. We'll skip the project. We'll say this is for meals. You know, it's for construction, and it was $56. Okay, and we have a reimbursement for that. So we'll go ahead and submit it. Now, because I entered it and I am Robert Jones's manager, watch what happens. When I click submit, it doesn't make me approve it. It knows I approved it, I entered it, so it goes right to approval. Okay, so it'll do that. If you're entering expenses for your employees, you won't have to approve it unless you set up another approval hierarchy structure. So now in that scenario, the process would still be the same. I'll select expenses to reimburse. Now you don't have to filter. You could leave this all blank, but I'm going to go right to ACH. Let's just process ACH ones. And if I click list, now I should see there's actually two. There's the other one that I did. And I'm just going to select the one we just did. So let's do it here. Payment date 4/30. It'll pre-fill in. Okay. Robert Jones. Let's select both of them. Why not? We'll do 4/30. Total is going to be 90.82. Okay. And this will create just one ACH file with multiple employees on it. So then I'll click save. And so now the process differs. I'm not going to go and print checks. What I'm going to now do is I'm now going to go over to cash management, and whoever has the security to generate an ACH file, this is where I'm going to go to do that. So I click on ACH file generation. You'll notice I must have had another one in there for 30. Here's the 90.82 one. Okay. But you can generate multiple payees in one ACH file. So I could select both and put them all in the same ACH file. In this case, I'm just going to, let's do both. Why not? So I'll select both and I'll generate the file. So when you do that, now that generates the file for those total transactions. So you'll notice here, it generated a file for a total of 120, and there's 2 payment transactions here. Now they happen to be the same employee, but you know, that's because they were done with separate runs. Typically it'd be multiple employees there. And you'll notice it's pending. Okay, so now what you have the option is once this ACH payment file has been generated, you have the option to bring it to Excel, bring it to a text file, or download it into an ACH file. So I would click download here, and you'll notice that ACH file gets downloaded on your machine. I'll open it up. Let's go here and open as a WordPad. Non-notepad's good. Yep. And you'll notice, so here's your ACH file, and it's all set up as a, I believe an unbalanced ACH file or balanced ACH file. Okay, so there's your 2 transactions. This transaction will get uploaded to your banking system. However, your process is in place now to do that. And once the file comes back from the bank as confirmed, so I would not click the confirm button here until it's actually confirmed through the bank. Once it's confirmed, you can come back into here and click confirm just like you did in the physical check. And once you click confirm, it's confirmed. That's when it's posting it. That's when it's updating your cash management, and you're good to go. Now, the system's also set up to give the employee an email if you want. And that was, if you remember, back in the setup of the employee. So back in the setup of the employee, we said for ACH, well, for both actually, do you want to send a payment notification? So they can get an email that says, hey, this went through. Please check your bank. That completes the process of creating employee expenses through Sage Intacct for construction. Please put any comments below. And if you have any questions or want to see more videos, go to our bug site or our YouTube channel. And thank you for joining us.